One in three of those entering the workforce by the 2030s would live in Africa. Growth in the global economy means that this youthful population must be gainfully and productively engaged. Africa has the opportunity to be an economic leader. Come and let's explore how this can be achieved. Good morning, Dr. Kale, and thank you for joining me on today's podcast. Where are you dialing from today?
Good morning, Tokwe. Thank you for inviting me. I'm calling in from Cairo in Egypt.
Awesome. So today's episode is focused on Africa. As you know, Africa has lots of resources and a huge population, and it has an opportunity to become an economic leader, but it's not there yet. So what I would like us to do is to explore what must be done for Africa to achieve this status of being an economic leader. And to start with the questions today, I'd like to understand Africa's value proposition to the world. We've had things like the green economy, leveraging on its population for the digital age. From your perspective, I'd like you to highlight this key value proposition and its superpower to the world.
I think Africa's superpower, like you said, lies in its combination of natural resources, its huge untapped markets, its abundant natural resources. In fact, the continent is known to be home to 30% of the world's mineral resources, including key minerals like platinum, rare earth metals like cobalt, many metals that are critical for the global green transition. It also, like you said, has a huge, rapidly growing young population, which ties into its competitive advantage as far as technology is concerned. Its huge human and green population is also gives it opportunity, has huge capital, as like I said, innovation and consumption. Um, so I think its value proposition lies in those key issues. Its huge population, which provides both labor as well as consumption for the rest of the world, and it also tied to an advantage for digital innovation, and the fact that it has significantly huge mineral deposits that are untapped, which the rest of the world actually needs for continuous industrialization, for sustainable development. I think that's what gives Africa its competitive advantage across the world. It's all driven by its natural resources, wealth, its demographic dynamics, also its geographical positioning, and of course, like I mentioned, growing technological adoption. So if you look at sectors like agriculture and agribusiness, for example, Africa, more than any other country in the world, has 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. 60% of the whole world's uncultivated arable land, huge potential. It has abundant water resources. It has generally favorable climatic conditions, which makes it a prime location for agricultural production. So as the world continues to grow, as population continues to expand, Africa is actually going to be the location that would eventually feed the rest of the world because it has such a huge amount of uncultivated land for agriculture, which you can use to provide feeding for the rest of the world, whether it is across a wide range of crop, that is cocoa, coffee, maize, tea, cassava. There's also a high value export such as organic and specialty agricultural products. So that's the opportunity. Is opportunities in agro processing industries. that can add value to its huge raw materials. There's huge scope to adopt modern farming technologies, for example, precision agriculture, irrigation systems, and so on. And all this gives Africa a huge opportunity to expand exports of growing of the growing global markets, exports a lot of agricultural commodities that can to feed the rest of the world, especially Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. I mentioned the fact that the continent is rich in minerals, lithium, and so on. Many of these minerals are critical for modern industries like renewable energy and electronics. So again, strengths in Africa possesses the strengths in being the largest global reserve, reserves of cobalt and platinum, actually, which are all essential for electric vehicles and renewable energy technologies. We also have significant deposits in Africa, oil, natural gas, for example, in Algeria and Nigeria, of course, Angola. So huge opportunities um, transitioning from raw material exports to local beneficiation and processing. Also, the opportunities for investment in renewable energy minerals, like I mentioned, lithium, copper, and so on, to support the global energy transition. Just two more examples, and there are quite a lot of them. They're also renewable energy. Uh, Africa has a huge, enormous untapped potential in solar, wind, hydro, and even geothermal energy. The Sahara Desert, for example, offers one of the highest solar irradiance levels, I think, in the world. East Africa also holds significant geothermal energy potential. For example, the Kenya's is the Okari geothermal plant. So you can see the opportunities also in renewable energy, from exporting clean energy to neighboring regions, especially in Europe, where the green energy corridor, or by expanding decentralized renewable energy systems to power rural and off-grid commodities all across the world. And then finally, opportunities, huge competitive advantage in technology and digital economy, which is coming out from its young, growing, large youth population, growing internet penetration, which is also creating a thriving tech ecosystem. So when you look at countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, South Africa, we are finding tremendous growth for emerging tech hubs. They are becoming emerging tech hubs in many of these countries. We have seen successful cases of innovations in fintech from Flutterwave, from Mpesa in Kenya. So it's a huge opportunity for scaling financial technology solutions to promote financial inclusion, which is still at the very low level in the continent. There's huge opportunity for building regional tech giants to meet local and global demand in e-commerce, logistics, and even in edtech. I'll add tourism as well. That's another area in Africa that is being lightly untapped and has huge opportunities. The continent offers a unique combination of wildlife, as we are aware, culture, its culture, huge cultural heritage, and again, it has diverse landscapes. Even manufacturing, even though it's currently underdeveloped, it still offers a huge, significant opportunities to create jobs and offer value because of, again, its proximity to these raw materials I'm referring to, and of course, access to currently low cost of labor. The others, I think I have to add creative industries. I think that's probably one of the ones that the rest of the world is very familiar with Africa. Yes, the creative industries, huge, rich culture heritage, it's a huge, glowing global interest in its music, film, art sectors. The whole world was talking about Dirty December a few weeks ago. So again, there's a huge opportunity. The global popularity of Afrobeats, the Nollywood industry, even its fashion industries, unique cultural assets that can all be monetized if you get things right. So I get there are huge opportunities in Africa, and I think that's where the value proposition comes from as far as Africa to the world is concerned.
So you've talked about a lot of this, resources that Africa has. You've talked about the creative industry, the manufacturing, green economy, tech. But there was a recent article by The Economist, and it talked about the fact that Africa is the only continent that does not have a Fortune 500 company. And today you have a lot of players, harnessing these resources. My question is, how can Africa achieve global redistribution of income? 69% of total global income resides with the global north, where you have only 21% of the population. I know they're not related, population versus the income, but given all these resources, how can we achieve scaling our income and competing at large?
Well, firstly, yes, there's no African country yet in the Fortune 500 list, but I think companies like we got Dangote Group in Nigeria, Safaricom I think, in Kenya, and the MTN Group in South Africa. I think there's huge potential for these African businesses to scale with the right policies and investments. I think some of these companies can actually be global leaders and can actually hit the Fortune 500 list. And I think that statement from the Economist that you mentioned, it just reflects the many of the things we need to change. But in terms of tapping a lot more of getting a larger share of global income, so that I think it's more about harnessing that huge population. Africa is home to about 1.4 billion people. So that's a huge market. There's no other, that's the largest continent in the world. And an estimate suggests another 10 or so years could be by far the largest number of people anywhere in the world. When you want to increase your share of global income, you are essentially saying you want to capture a larger market share. That starts, first of all, by capturing your own market share within the continent. The 1.4 billion people I'm talking about currently have a GDP of over 3.8 billion, which clearly can be increased. The only reason why that GDP is just 3.8 billion for 1.4 billion people is because of the low level of income of Africa. So when you do the right things, when governments in Africa take the right policies to grow the living standards of Africans, increase their ability to purchase, increase effective demand, then then that huge population becomes an effective market, and that in itself would already capture a larger proportion of the global economy. Then secondly, you need to export. You need to export a lot more, and to export a lot more, you have to fix some of the things that prevent us from being competitive globally. Increase value addition rather than continuously exporting raw materials. We need to move into more manufactured finished goods, so we can capture more value across the supply chains. We need to trade more with ourselves rather than with the rest of the world. Currently in Africa, countries, 20%, while we trade more. So we are actually the ones contributing more to the mismatch, where you said over 60% the global north. Of course, it's going to be when 80% of Africa exports are to, Africa is trading, 80% of African trade is to the north. So you are essentially giving a lot of your money to this same region. So if you trade more with yourselves, then a lot more of the money that is going out stays within the continent, and then a larger share of global income resides within the continent. We have to negotiate better trading terms, because until you can until you can export effectively to all these markets, you really can't take advantage, and you really can't grow your share of global income. And many of these trade terms are usually biased against the continent. So if Africa speaks with one voice, they are able and takes advantage of its huge opportunities that everybody else in the world wants to tap into, then it can get better trade terms and be able to penetrate more of these markets more effectively. We need to address capital flight, both legal and illegal. Illegal in the sense that all the money that is stolen and taken out of the country to help develop other countries. Again, when money moves from Africa to the north, the money is used in the north to produce, is given as loans to produce, that aids production in this global north, that aids the production and sales of these Fortune 500 companies. And again, that helps keep a larger proportion of income in those kind of countries. Also, African countries need to start trading more, start spending more, retaining their capital within the country. If we have more tastes for goods and services produced in the north, and we spend all our money, export all our capital to the north, then how are you going to increase the share rather than spend it on commodity goods and services produced within the continent, then of course you're not going to be able to grow your share of all of the global income. All you're doing is helping to grow demand in the global, not helping to keep those companies within the Fortune 500 healthy at the expense of your own local companies within the continent. So I think strengthen regional markets, fully implement the African Continental Free Trade Area, which the objective to unify these 1.4 billion people I mentioned that have about $3.8 trillion in GDP. This will enable African companies to achieve scale. It will enable them to attract more investments and also to compete globally. We need to fix the issues of that keep our cost of production high within the continent, fix the entire east of doing business. Infrastructure, invest in infrastructure, expand transportation networks, energy grids, digital infrastructure, reduce operational costs, increase efficiency for governments, do a lot more public-private partnership to reduce costs. Because at the end of the day, the only way you can penetrate, the only way you can export to the rest of the world to increase your share of global income is if you're able to produce things cheaper or produce them more, improve their quality. That's the only way you're able to get people purchasing your product. So if you don't take care of those things that are costing business to be expensive within the continent, they are not going to be able to compete globally. You're not going to be able to produce and export to those markets, and you're not going to be able to extract more income from the rest of the world. So you have to fix all these many things that we've heard so many times in terms of improving the ease of doing business. We also have to develop local financial markets so that we don't have to rely on African countries now rely on foreign capital. And unfortunately, when we go and look for foreign capital, we are always disadvantaged because we have to get that capital at much higher rates than other countries will, because there's this perceived, unfair perceived assumption of higher risk. So we're going to, whereas a company in the north is going to borrow the same amount of funds at 3%, they might ask African countries to borrow the exact same amount at 10, 12, 15%. How do you compete globally? How do you expand production to export when you are producing at much higher cost? So that's, again, you have to develop our own local financial markets. We have to support African champions. That's quite important. I think governments and financial institutions within African countries need to identify and support high potential companies. Those are the people I'm referring to as African champions. And then support them with funding, support them with favorable policies, support them with technical expertise. Again, to help them to scale internationally. And again, take advantage, like I said, of our huge youth population and its implications for technology, its implications for creative industries. I think that's essentially what we need to do to extract a lot more income from the global economy, and in the process we distribute global economy. You treat global economy so that the shares are more increase on our side.
And just to add to that, you talked about how we can rebalance the income, and one of the things is that I have seen is we have this population. We must engage and employ that population. In fact, there was an article that said for the world economy growth to happen, Africa must make its population productive. In Africa, as you mentioned, we have about 1.5 billion population. 60% of those are within the less than 25. And that's the kind of population that is youthful, that would be productive. But to achieve productivity, you need more industries. You talked about supporting, our champions, our African champions. But these companies also are faced with challenges in terms of doing business. You talked about the ease of doing business. What must be done differently, to ensure that we have a retention of these companies and to attract the investment? As a businessman, you want to put money, but you also want to be sure that the policies that are in place do not affect your company negatively. So what must be done differently to ensure that we continue to attract these investments and we retain the best talents in Africa?
Well, I'll start with the last part, the talent, the population. Population can either be an asset or a liability. When people talk about Africa's huge population, as long as it remains currently is mostly a liability, and that's because it's not been harnessed properly. It's not been managed strategically. Population growth and size of your population growth is only an asset if it is managed properly. And that population, you need to focus on education and skill development, prioritize STEM education, vocational training to align the workforce skills with future industries. And the key word here is future industry. We find that our educational systems in Africa is always playing catch up. So there's a new technology that comes out in America or somewhere in Europe, and then while we're still trying to learn it and pick it up, a new one has been introduced that makes the old one obsolete. So we just keep playing catch up. And until we keep on, and because we keep playing catch up, it's very difficult to actually keep pace and compete. So you have to align that population with the way the rest of the world is going, what is requirements of future companies, future industries. Also job creation, particularly in emerging sectors. Once you've trained your population in the right future, in the right way, in line with what is going to be required in the next generation or so, then you have to create jobs in those sectors. So job creation in emerging sectors, they need to invest in technology, renewable energy. That's where the world is going. Agribusiness, manufacturing, and so on, to absorb that growing labor force. Because at the end of the day, if the population is huge, without jobs, then it's not an effective market. It's just more of a liability. You have to, you won't be able to purchase. Like I said, production is tied to consumption. So if you're talking about businesses, even if you get all the policies right, even if all the conditions or ease of doing business is fine and everything is working effectively, if there is no effective demand domestically, then companies would not want to expand or will not want to set up within Africa. So you have to ensure that the African economy, the African population is one that can actually consume in a growing fashion, a growing manner, products produced by these companies that would attract them to come in. The argument of Africa's population as a huge market is only real if that population actually can consume. And that ability of that population to consume is tied to job creation. The next thing I would mention has to do with in infrastructure, the need for urban planning and infrastructure development. Uh, Again, where the world is going, develop more smart cities, more efficient transportation systems that can support growing urban population. Again, these are the kind of things that would encourage current investment, domestic investment, as well as foreign investments to come into a particular country, which is actually what is needed if we're going to attract more of global income. I would also, I think lots of studies also suggested that countries that empower their women and that empower their youth uh, by promoting gender equality, entrepreneurship programs, and so on. This is exactly how you unlock the potential of what you might term historically underutilized groups. So you do all with investment, capital goes to where it's courted, where it's going to be productive, where it's going to make money. If you create an environment where there is a market because people can consume the products, and where cost of production is cheaper relative to other places, you create huge investment in that economy. And that's exactly what Africa needs to do. We need to develop its people and work on fixing the environment so that businesses can thrive, whether it is in production of goods or in provision of services. And that's how you grow your economy. You encourage investments to come in by making the environment profitable um, to 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 businesses.
Economic integration among the different countries in Africa is quite important. Why do you believe that it's important now more than ever before? So you have things happening in America, for example, America talking about increase in tariffs. You have that agreement and signage in the Asian countries and in Europe. But with Africa, we're seeing less of that. Do you believe that AfCFTA would really help that economic integration that we are looking at in Africa?
Well, I think you answered the first question. Why is it so important right now? The world is let me be very, globalization is dead or is dying. Everybody and it's going to get worse in the next 4 years for obvious reasons. Everybody in the last since COVID-19, countries have been more than ever before been very nationalized. Everybody's looking at their own country. So globalization is dead. And you have an African country that its majority of its capital flows, majority of its trade flows is with non-African countries. So when you have a situation where every country, every continent of the world is thinking about itself, it's at the expense of the African region. So the only way forward, or the best way forward, is Africa to depend less on these non-African countries, and that's where we are pushing. That's why people are pushing pushing regional integration through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. When you are, let me give an example. If Nigeria wants to import something and is importing it from London, when it could import, so it's giving the money, it's giving its dollars the UK to import a particular commodity that it can buy, say, in Ghana. So why give the revenue to the United Kingdom when they can give the revenue to Ghana? At the same time, Ghana wants to purchase something, it's purchasing it from Germany when it could purchase it from Nigeria. Then that case is giving the revenue to Nigeria than Germany. That's the benefit of trading more with yourselves rather than trading with much more advanced countries. You are helping those countries develop. You are making things easier for them at your own expense. It's even worse when you have a situation where the world is moving into everybody. Like I said, globalization is dead. So if you are dependent on Europe and Europe shuts down, then you're in trouble. So it's better to work closer with other African countries. That's one of the reasons that advocated for pushing the full implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In addition to that, it even helps in terms of sustainable development because it reduces greenhouse emissions coming from transport. The amount of emissions you're going to use transporting our goods, exporting our goods to North America or Europe, because of the distance, it's a lot less if we are just transporting within the continent, for example. So there's benefits for revenue generation for African countries. There's synergy, and there's also benefit to the environment for improving regional integration by fully implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
But let me pick you up on that. So you talked about globalization being dead, but ideally, should every country just focus on, their own self? You don't believe that we can achieve more if there was fair trade. And what do I mean by fair trade? You have both parties benefiting, and not just one party taking advantage of that. So I believe that where you have that fair trade play, globalization is still a thing than what we have right now. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. In an ideal world where everybody is prepared to play fair, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Companies, any policy, any trade, there's always going to be a winner and a loser, no matter what. And nobody wants to be the loser. And I think what fair trade tries to suggest is it goes against the profit maximization mindset of a commercial world. What fair play says is, well, I will not maximize my profits in the US because I want Tanzania to get a bit more. The world's not going to work that way. I think we understand that. Each business exists to maximize their own profits at the expense of anybody else. So that it's ideology. It's good. It's good ideology that everybody should pay fair. But I think we understand. We have to be realistic. The world does not work that way. The world will never work that way. It's an idea. It's a beautiful idea that is not going to work in practice. And if we sit around saying that we're waiting for other countries or other businesses to say, you know what, I don't want to maximize my profits. I don't want to get return on investment of 80%. I'm okay doing 40%. So other country, other business can benefit. I think that's an idea that is laudable, but it's one that is not going to exist in the world that we currently live in. And the different times we have seen economic crises around the world, it has played out. The reality, it has played out. Individuals, businesses, countries do not play fair. Every country is at every point, even in the era of globalization, is trying to maximize its own benefits, and they're only willing to consider another country, another individual, another business benefiting as long as it's not at their expense. And I think that's unfortunately the way the world works, and probably will continue to work.
Interesting. I think let's move on to the last or penultimate question. What are your aspirations for the African continent?
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, I'm proudly African. I'm proudly Nigerian. I would like to see an African country that is achieving its potential, which is huge. In which case, it's a continent that is driving global innovation, one that is leveraging its youth and technology to lead in areas like renewable energy, agri-tech, fintech, and so on. I would like to see an Africa that finally achieves real economic sovereignty. So we're not reduce our dependence on external aid that makes other countries dictate whatever they want to us. By building robust self-sufficient economies, I want to see an Africa that promotes inclusive growth, not a situation where a few people are in control of 99% of the entire economy, of the entire African economy, one that ensures equitable wealth distribution, an Africa that ensures gender equality, an Africa that ensures opportunities for all citizens, not the richer person can command the security or judiciary to its own benefits. Like I said, equal opportunities for all citizens. I want to see an Africa that speaks with one voice, one that strengthens regional integration and collaboration to amplify its global influence. I would say global Africa. Understanding that we're actually one country, even though we are made up of 4 different countries. Speaking with one voice, acting with one voice, taking control of owning our own destiny, and taking the right decisions to move our people forward. Also one that leads in, essentially because of our mineral resources in that regard, one that leads in sustainability. An Africa that is positioned itself as a global leader in climate action and green economic development. I think, and there are many others, but I think this is an Africa that I would like to see in the next few years.
Well, I couldn't agree more with you, especially the one where you talked about an Africa that is not reliant on global aid. And I think that ties in nicely with your point on the globalization. If we are not going to see free trade, if we're not going to see fair trade, then Africa needs to be its own. Africa needs to push itself out there and come of age and not rely on external aid. Thank you, Dr. Kale, for joining me and for the insights that you have shared today.